Hey guys, Hackersploit here, back again with another video, and in this video we're going to be looking at performing deauthentication attacks on WPA and WPA2 wireless networks. Now, many of you out there will be wondering why exactly am I making this video and why exactly am I making this video now? And to answer both of those questions, firstly, the reason I'm making this video is because this is a very highly requested video. Now, if you actually go through my channel, you'll actually realize that I do not have a lot of wireless penetration testing videos as much as I enjoy doing it. And when it comes down to various concepts, especially specialist concepts like penetration testing on wireless networks, it's something that needs to be explained to be understood. So that's the goal of these videos, to explain every step so that you understand. Now, if you look at my previous wireless penetration testing videos, I've covered various tools like Airgeddon, which automates most of the tedious processes like capturing a handshake, etc. You get the idea. That's why that tool was created. Now, as much as those tools are extremely helpful, understanding each step of that process is extremely important and is very, very good to know how to replicate manually with the AirCrack suite. Now, the reason I call AirCrack a suite is because it contains various other tools that come bundled together, and they all help within the same process or work within the same life cycle or the cycle, in the sense that you can perform your packet capturing, and essentially you can crack the handshake all within one suite. So we'll be looking at AeroDump, AirPlay, and AirCrack as well. So when it comes down to essentially deauthentication attacks and WPA2, of course, as I mentioned, WPA3 is on its way, and I'm also planning a very, very exciting number of videos on that. I have a lot of exciting videos planned for this month, so do stay tuned for that. But regardless of that, let me start explaining deauthentication attacks. Now, deauthentication attacks are very, very simple to understand. Essentially, what's going on is you are trying to deauthenticate a client from the access point and essentially disconnecting them from the access point. All right, so it can be looked at as a denial of service, and that's primarily what you're looking for as an attacker. Now, there are various reasons you might want to perform a denial of service. One being the most obvious, the fact that you want to get devices off the network for malicious purpose. You may be trying to get a server. Well, servers don't actually use, they usually don't have any wireless capability. You're trying to get computers that are being used wirelessly off the network. And as you pretty much would have guessed, this is a huge problem, because you can imagine this scenario on an enterprise network, and this is the sad thing is this is extremely effective, especially on WPA2. This is one of the problems that a lot of wireless networks and enterprise networks really face, is the fact that you can deauthenticate computers on that network, computers or clients on that network, without even being authenticated to that network. All right, so essentially what you're doing is you're disconnecting computers or clients from the network, or you can essentially perform a complete denial of service on the router or the access point itself, therefore disconnecting all clients connected to it. All right, so as I've mentioned, that might be one of the reasons you're doing it. Of course, I do not promote any of this. Please use these techniques on a personal environment, or an environment in which you have permission to perform these various techniques. So the other way is for WPA and WPA2 password cracking. Now, you might be saying, well, how exactly does that come into play? Well, if you remember, with WEP, we essentially capture a handshake, and cracking the keys is very simple. You essentially need only about one handshake. Now, I'm not going to explain handshakes because I've explained that before, but essentially what's going on here is with WPA and WPA2 cracking and deauthentication, what you're trying to do here is you're trying to deauthenticate a client on the network, and when they re-authenticate, you're trying to capture that handshake. Once you've captured that handshake, you can then try and crack it. Now, with WPA and WPA2, you require a lot more handshakes before you can actually crack it successfully, and that's where AirCrack comes into place. But for this video, we're going to be focusing on essentially the whole deauthentication process and how it can be done, and also in a way that you can understand. All right, so let's get started. And before we do anything, the prerequisites for this video are that you will require a wireless adapter that supports packet injection. Now, I will drop a link in the description that has all the wireless adapters that do support packet injection. I am currently using the TP-Link TLWN722N version 1. Now, a lot of people ask me why the version 2 does not work, and the version 2 is the updated version that uses a different network interface manufacturer, and as a result, it does not support packet injection. Now, the version 1 is extremely difficult to find, as I've heard. For some reason, I was extremely lucky because I actually got one last year, which is quite rare to get one like simply by going into a shop. But I got one and it works perfectly. I'll be dropping the links to the other adapters like the alpha adapters, so you can check them out on Amazon. They work just the same. All right, so when getting started with Aircrack, the first thing you need to do is understand your network interfaces. All right, and to do that, I usually like using the IWconfig. All right, now when you type in IWconfig, this will essentially display your wireless adapters for you and essentially all your interfaces. Now, I currently have my wireless adapter or my Wi-Fi adapter, whatever you want to call it. I currently have it on monitor mode. Now, what I'm going to do just really simply is I'm just going to stop monitor mode on my wireless adapter so that I can explain it right from the beginning. So I'm just going to type in IWconfig right now. All right, excellent. So you can see that my wireless adapter is now named appropriately. It is called WLAN 0 and it is currently in managed mode. Now, you might be wondering what exactly is managed and monitor mode. Well, when your wireless adapter is in managed mode, it means it will only work with packets that are designated to your particular computer or its particular network interface card, and by that I mean the MAC address. All right, when you talk about a card in a network interface or wireless adapter in monitor mode, and of course it does need to support monitor mode, it essentially means that the card is in promiscuous mode, which means it is able to capture packets that do not belong to its particular MAC address. So it's capturing packets from all the other devices around it, which is awesome because you can actually get them and decipher them if they aren't encrypted. But that's not what we're going to be looking at now. So to enter or to essentially change your device into monitor mode, what you need to do is you need to type in airmon ng, and as you already saw, I use the status. In this case, I want to start the monitor mode on my wireless adapter, and of course, as intuitive as it is, you need to then specify your wireless adapter. In this case, the wireless adapter is WLAN 0, or my wireless interface is WLAN 0. I'm going to hit enter and we're going to wait for it to complete, and it's going to give you the interface name, the new interface name, which is WLAN 0 mon. All right, excellent. So once we have that, you can again run the IWconfig just to confirm the interface name. And once you have it, we're pretty much ready to go in regards to using AeroDump. All right, so the first thing we need to do is we need to actually start capturing packets from the particular wireless network that we want to perform the deauthentication on. Now, AeroDump, when using AeroDump, we can essentially use it and scan all the wireless networks around us and their respective devices connected to them. But because we're targeting a particular network, we need to have it the router's access point. And again, that can be done by simply typing in aerodump ng and the interface name, which in this case is LAN0mon. And this is the first command that you should run. All right. Now, once you run it, it'll start capturing all the packets and it'll start displaying all the respective networks that they belong to. So you'll start seeing all the different Wi-Fi networks around your area being populated. Now, for the purpose of protecting my neighbor's identity, because as you know, my blurring skills in my video editing isn't really the best, and I end up leaking information anyway. So I already have my router's MAC address, and you'll see that it'll be displayed here in a second. So I already have it, and once I have that, I can then target that particular network. And essentially what's going to happen is when I specify a particular wireless network, that allows me to then only deal with the devices connected to that network, which is extremely helpful. So I have the MAC address or the BSSID here, so I'm just going to copy it. All right, so we're going to use AeroDump, but now that we have the particular network, we can now specify, or we only want to work with that particular network. All right, so AeroDump ng, and we now need to specify the interface, which is what I like doing first. So LAN0mon. Of course, you can specify this at the end, but this is the syntax that I personally prefer. So then the BSSID, which is the MAC address of the access point, and the channel it is on. So that is denoted by the channel parameter. And my current Wi-Fi network is on channel 10. Now again, as I said, if you run aerodump ng with just the interface name and you scan the networks around you, all of this information will be displayed clearly, as you'll see in a second. So I'm going to hit enter, and again, it is going to select my particular network. You can see it's called Alexis Broadlink right over here, and it'll give you information about the network. So let's go through this really simply. So you have your BSSID, which is the router or the access point MAC address. You have the amount of beacons being sent, and you have the channel, which is what I mentioned below. And if you run aerodump again with the interface name, this is the same information you get, except more wireless networks will be populated here, and the various clients will be populated here as well. All right, so we can see that we have the authentication mode is PSK, which is pre-shared key, very simple, and it's using WPA2 encryption. All right, so we will now want to perform our deauthentication attack. We need to first decide what device we want to perform the deauthentication attack. And what you're looking for traditionally or realistically is you're looking for a device that is very active on the network. And you can see that by its current frames, the amount of frames that are being sent, of course. And you also have the proximity that is denoted by the power, the power signal here. So I'm going to open up my Android phone, and immediately you'll start seeing that the frames are going to start increasing. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to open up a website right over here. I'm just going to open up, for example, let me just open up bbc.com, and that is the British Broadcasting Corporation, not what you guys think it is, for those of you very creative minded people. So you can see that indeed it is working, and if I run something a little bit more intensive like a speed test, you'll see that the frames will increase quite a bit. And of course, that's what you're looking for. You're looking for a device that is very active on the network. So as I mentioned, this is my current Android device here, and that is the device that I'm going to perform the deauthentication attack on. Now, this is where you have two choices to make. And again, judging by your decision or the reason for you performing this deauthentication attack, you're either performing a denial of service or you're trying to capture Handshake. So let's start off with the first scenario. You're trying to perform a denial of service for this particular device. All right, so you want to disconnect this device from the wireless network. All right, so essentially you want to disable its Wi-Fi and prevent it from connecting to the wireless network. So what we're going to do now is we are going to leave this running, and that's the reason I'm using Terminator here. So we're going to split this up here, and I'm just going to zoom in a little bit here so you can see what's going on. All right, so to deauthenticate a device, I recommend leaving this running, and I'll explain why. It really doesn't matter right now, but I'll explain it. Let me just open up my screen recorder on my phone so I can actually show you that this does work right over here. So I'm just going to open it up here, screen recorder, and there it is, it's open. And I'm going to open up the dialog here, and I will open up my settings menu and into my Wi-Fi network. All right, so the screen should pop up once I perform the deauthentication attack. All right, so to perform the deauthentication attack, we will need two pieces of information. We need the router BSSID and the target BSSID, which is the device you want to deauthenticate from the network. And to do that, we simply type in AirPlay. All right, so we say AirPlay NG. All right, and now we need to specify the mode. What mode are we in when using AirPlay? To specify the deauthentication mode, we use the 0 command, or the 0 amount of the amount of deauthentication packets or the deauthentication requests that you want to send to the device. Now, this is going to affect how long the device is going to be disconnected from the network. So if you select about 10 of them, then that means after the 10 packets or requests have been sent to the access point, essentially because you're spoofing the address, you're deauthenticating the device from the network. What's going to happen is when those packets are all sent, the device will be able to connect once again. So if you want to disconnect a particular device for a long amount of time, increase the amount of packets to something like 10,000. In this case, I'm going to keep mine simple. I'm just going to keep it at 10 so that I'll keep it at 10 so that you guys can see that indeed it does disconnect it until all of the deauthentication packets have been sent. All right, after this, we then use the A parameter to specify, we use it to specify the access point BSSID, which in this case is right over here. This is the BSSID, so I'll just paste that in there. And then we use the C parameter to specify the target MAC address, which is right over here. And I'm just going to paste that right over here, and we can then we can then print out or display or essentially type in the interface name, so WLAN0mon. And what's going to happen is once I hit enter, it is going to deauthenticate my device from my wireless network. So what I'm going to do, guys, is I'm just essentially going to start recording on my screen, and it is recording. So you should see it anytime on the right hand side or the left hand side. And I'm going to hit enter to start the deauthentication process. And once that happens, is you'll see that my wireless device is unable to connect right over here. All right. And once the deauthentication packets have been sent, you can see that my device is still not connected and still has to be connected to manually. So I've just clicked on it and my device is able to connect to the network again. So to show you that this does work, I'm going to increase the amount of packets being sent to something of about 50, so that I can show you that if I try and connect while the deauthentication packets are being sent, I will not be able to actually connect to the network. So I'm going to hit enter again and they're being sent. So I've been disconnected once more. And it's essentially switching between networks, trying to connect, but you can see nothing's happening. So I'm going to try and connect again. Nothing's happening. Again, it's simply just being deauthenticated and not getting any connection. So there you are. So once the 50 deauthentication packets have been sent, that is the only time I'll be able to essentially connect to the network. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to terminate the deauthentication packets right over here. And we'll wait for them to complete because they still haven't been processed depending on the amount you've sent. And there we are. We have successfully connected to the network. All right. So that is how to perform a deauthentication attack on a particular device connected to a network. And the key thing to note here is the fact that I am not currently connected to this wireless network. This is done unauthenticated. My current internet connection is through Ethernet right over here. I'm not connected to that wireless network at all. All right, which is really, really awesome. That does show you the power. All right, so that is essentially performing a denial of service. Now, you might have also realized that when performing a denial of service, you can also perform a denial of service on the entire network, which is extremely powerful. And you can see how effective this is. So your other question might be, well, how exactly do we do this? Well, the process is really, really simple. And I'll show you this in a second. All right. So when we talk about, I need to explain it first. When we talk about essentially performing a denial of service on the entire network, we are essentially sending a broadcast deauthentication packet essentially on the, we're sending it as the router to all the devices connected to the network. So we're essentially pretending to be the router. And we're sending all of these deauthentication packets to all of the devices connected to the network, therefore kicking them off the network, which is extremely powerful and mind-boggling really when you think about it. The amount of damage you can do at a coffee shop. Not a lot of people know about this and they don't utilize this. They all want to crack passwords, but you can cause real mayhem. Not that I encourage you to do so. So the syntax still remains the same. So let me just clear this out. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to edit this syntax a little bit, and you'll be shocked as to what I need to edit exactly. So airplay ng, we want to select the parameter 0 to that essentially denotes a deauthentication attack. And we're going to send only about 10 packets because I actually require my network on my phone right now. So 10. And what I'm going to do now is we only need to specify the access point right over here, the access point MAC address, and I'm just going to select that right over here, and we specify the interface name, and that's simply all you need. It's even easier to kick all devices off the network instead of kicking one device off. So I'm just going to hit enter, and that is essentially going to disconnect all the other devices connected to the network. And hopefully my screen is able to record this right now. If it isn't, I can vouch for it, and you can try this yourself. And once the deauthentication packets have been sent, the devices will reconnect automatically. So again, it's all dependent on the amount of deauthentication packets you can send. So usually you'll put it at about 100,000. So you keep that running, and that'll just give you an unlimited amount of time to essentially do whatever you want, whether it is a denial of service. All right, so that was a mouthful. Now let's talk about something a little bit more interesting, which is for those of you who want to crack the Wi-Fi password. All right, now this is again very, very simple to understand. What's going on here is, as I mentioned I mentioned the process what I was explaining earlier. What you're trying to do here is you are essentially trying to get a device to be deauthenticated, so that when it re-authenticates, you capture the handshake. Now, as I said, the amount of handshakes will greatly improve your chance of cracking the password. So that is something to take into consideration, and you need to really capture a lot of handshakes. So the more active a network, the better for you. So that if the devices are inactive, then your chance of actually getting a handshake or many handshakes for that matter are going to be very, very low, and therefore your chances of cracking the password will be very low. So the process still remains the same, except we need to capture all the traffic and all the packets and all the handshakes into a cap file or a pcap file. And we can do that using AeroDump, as I'll show you right now. So we're just going to terminate this current AeroDump session here. And now we are essentially going to just repeat the process, except we essentially now need to we need to output the file into a capture file. And of course, you can use Wireshark to analyze all this traffic. In fact, I recommend that you do if you're actually learning about this. So what we're going to type in is AeroDump, or we can actually simply just repeat the command, because all we are essentially doing here is we are just writing out the data. So we use the W command, and this will be stored in my root directory. So I'll just call it capture, and I'm going to hit enter. All right, so I've essentially called the capture file or the cap file capture. So if I list the files in my home directory, you can see that if we do not specify the file extension, it saves it in various formats, that being the cap file, the CSV, kismet.csv, and you have your log.csv, which is excellent. But what we want to work with and what Aircrack will prefer is a capture file. So now let's talk about actually getting the handshake. How do we do that? So we have to deauthenticate a device, and we then have to wait for it to re-authenticate. So again, we're looking for a device that is very active on the network and a device that is really moving and transferring a lot of data. So you're looking for someone who is on the internet quite a bit. So what you're going to do now is we're going to run the same deauthentication attack on my Android device here, the one that we ran earlier, which is this one right over here. But instead of making that 50, we want to just make it a very, very short deauthentication so that they can re-authenticate quick. And we can keep on running this. And what you can do is create a very, very simple Python script that will loop this as many times as you want. Hopefully we can create one. All right, so I'm just going to hit enter, and that is going to deauthenticate the device. And we're just going to wait for that to essentially send all the deauthentication. And I'm going to connect to my Wi-Fi network. There we are. I've connected back, and we should have captured a handshake. Now, to actually confirm you've captured a handshake, this is where you essentially use Aircrack now fully, and you specify the capture file and the word list that you want to use to crack the password. Now, as many people would have told you, or if this is your first time, it is vital that you leave this open if you're still capturing handshakes. So that, again, Aircrack can use that. It can use all the extra information that you're feeding it to crack the password or to give you a better chance of cracking the password. Now, I do have to mention something. The chances or the probability of you cracking a password is dependent on the complexity and the length of the password. So the longer the password and the more complex it is, the harder it will be to crack, irregardless of the word list that you use. All right, so I'm just going to be explaining the syntax. I'm not cracking my own password here because that's not really my philosophy here, or what I'm looking to do. All right, so I'm just going to clear this out. And what we're looking to do now is to use that capture file to crack the password. And of course, this is not what I would recommend doing, because we haven't captured any more handshakes. We have just captured one, which isn't enough, as you will see. Aircrack will tell us that. So the syntax is as follows: Aircrack ng, and we now need to specify the path to the capture file, which is root, and the capture file is called capture.cap. We then need to use the W parameter here to specify the word list. The word lists in Kali Linux are found in the user share word list folder, like over here, and I'll use the rocku word list, and I'm going to hit enter. And we're just going to give that a few seconds to essentially display all the data it did. And for some reason, all right, so there we are. So it was able to display all the data. So let me just take you through what's going on here. So you can see it's going to tell you it's read 4,421 packets. Not a lot, trust me. And it got only one WPA handshake for this particular network, right? Which is quite interesting. And it's going to choose the first network as a target because we're only targeting one network. And it's going to open all the packets or one potential target, and it's going to test only about 2 out of 206,751 keys, and it's going to tell you that it's not found. Now, the reason it's telling you it's not found is because you do not have enough handshakes to actually run this. So what you're looking for is constant deauthentication and reauthentication, getting as many handshakes as possible, therefore increasing your chance and probability of cracking the password. Now you can see that the number of packets read in the beginning here was 4,421, and the capture file is still being it's constantly being increased by the amount of packets that are being stored. So if I hit enter and we'll let that run for a second, because the file is still being written to, you'll find a very different scenario here. You can see now it has increased to 4,654 packets, but essentially what we're looking for is more handshakes here. And that is how to use the deauthentication attacks on WPA and WPA2 to either perform a denial of service or for capturing handshakes that can then later be used for essentially password cracking. Alright, so that is going to be it for this video, guys. Thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions or suggestions, let me know in the comment section, on my social networks, or on my website. I'll be seeing you in the next video. Peace, guys.